Evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Gaming with Blockchain. I'm your host, AMineU, and today we're just going to have a Totem experience review. That's essentially what this is all about. We've went through the 30-day cycle. I will just share my opinion on what my experience has been like, and you could have your own feedback and take the information as you will. But most importantly, just a reminder, as always, this is not financial advice. This has nothing to do with guaranteeing any promises of any sort. It's just a feedback and an opinion, and take it as an educational process. So what do we have here? I went through my totem 30 days, and I had two totems that I unlocked. Both were brown. So let's take a look at the first one. I will be going through my assets here, find my totem, and we're just going to look at the shark. And I'm going to admit, this I think has probably between this and maybe a toucan, I can't remember which other one, it was probably the most hated of all the totems, at least from the reviews I've seen. I can't fault in this opinion. I have to say this totem was problematic, in all truth. Couldn't figure it out. It started to get its groove, but it wasn't my favorite nonetheless. So what we're going to do here, I'm just going to show you how everything kind of stacked up in terms of what was happening, and we'll do another comparison later. So I had a brown totem, so it was the second to last in terms of its value or ranking or whatever the case is. Let's say, like, if you see here in the traits, gold being the top, so mine brown here, orange being the least. And it was interesting. Whoops, let's go back there. That's not what I wanted to do. I keep doing that. I don't know why I keep doing that. So very, very, very painful process. So let's get you back in the screen here, and let's take a look at what's going on. So I mean, again, this is just my perspective. Everyone will probably have their own kind of processes on how they look at it, and I'm just looking at pure ins and outs. I don't know what the values are in terms of what was missed and how that penalties were achieved and how yields were generated. This is, I'm sure that formula is far more extensive than what I'm showing you here. Just in a review from the 30 days, ins and outs, simple as that, and at least and the reasoning behind my thinking, the best way I could describe it. So, the total that was provided for my two was 1110 in terms of protum. The shark received half, and then the other totem received the other half. I also purchased about 580 protum, so again another allocation split down the middle. So total protum spent here was 845. My yield in gross was 1948.83. My total feed was 1499. Now in terms of cost, however, if I take away what I received from the totem allocation, and what I purchased against what was actually fed in total. So I went past my budget, if you had to think of it that way. I had a budget of 845, and it cost me total of 1499, and so it was an excess of 654 if I add the purchase elements with it, or if it's just allocation value, I was beyond my budget by 944. So again, these are just the same numbers but in a negative. So what had happened is that from my yield, I was now taking my yield to again continue the cycle. It took 34.6 of my yield, so my earnings, to feed back my protum. Or if I didn't if I didn't make any spend, if I didn't buy any protum, it was about 50% almost of what I was receiving. Now again, these are just broad allocations because it's, what are those penalties that come in? I have no idea. But if I stayed on track and I was and everything was in place as it is right now, this is what the numbers have shown me. So if I look at net yield values with the allocation and the purchase, it was about 53% plus what I already put in. If it was allocation only, it was 81% plus what was already provided, which is not horrible. So I made 81% on top of the 555 that Upland provided, or I made 53% on top of what I purchased and what Upland provided. Now, the other side of the flip is, well, I had missed some fees. I know I had missed some fees, and I did an average of what that would have cost in terms of value. And so if I didn't miss the fees, I would have been up, about another 20%, give or take, in terms of what I was able to gain in return. So all in all, not a bad experience. But I do have to say, not entirely thrilled with the shark. I mean, but at least it's a learning curve, understanding of what was going on, and I'll explain more about that in a moment. So let's take a look at the charts. Let's take a look at the actual tools, and this is a great tool that from the how would I say, the community, and they've made this fantastic kind of entry of what's been going on, how you can kind of evaluate your Proton. So if I look back at my Proton, this is at feed time about 12 hours, which is correct. This is what I was looking at, and again, they were looking at 1,200 Proton. As you saw, I spent a little bit more. They're looking at maybe 20. I was doing about 29. I could have done 25, perhaps, because if I found 20 was a little too low. I was getting that kind of feedback, maybe feed a bit more. So I creeped it back up to around the 29 range, trying to think, okay, if I put 29, do I get more in return, and so forth. And again, of course, trying to maintain the timing and all that stuff. So you can see there's all these different variables that came into play. So I did miss a few feeds overall, and I think it was about 10 feeds that I had missed, and that, give or take, kind of balanced out in terms of what I would have saved in reducing my feed amount if I went down to 25. So it was about 150 Proton here, plus or minus. And so this wasn't, again, a horrible experience. It gave me an idea and it helped me understand where these figures were coming from. So now if I go back to my tree, and the tree was this interesting. So the tree itself, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I thought because it was a small base or medium base, it would struggle in terms of the performance variable, and it didn't. It really performed quite well. So the same attributes, the same kind of formula I applied to the shark, I applied here, but the yield requirements from what I was earning in terms of the yield to return back to feed wasn't as high as it was with the shark. So I'm now thinking I may have been able to, with this palm tree, not spend an additional amount of Proton. I could have possibly just worked on the allocation alone. Now, mind you, with both of these were both a hockey stick. So even though I'm anticipating I could have, because they're a hockey stick, the yield amounts were only increasing near the end and started to peak at the end point. So the theory is, would the Proton have been able to survive and sustain itself until the yields were increasing significantly? And that's another, again, variable of variables to the unknown unknowns, if you want to call it that. But it did perform quite well. It was shockingly surprising, and I didn't expect that, not from the palm tree for sure. And I did miss as well, with like the shark, I did miss feeds and whatnot. So again, penalties were definitely part of the factor. So if I look at the palm tree here and go into details, and same kind of hours. Um, Total spend again. I could have gone a little higher. I was about 1049, so I could have gone higher. I was only doing 20 for my Proton generally, but they had put it at 21.67. So interesting perspective on how that could have happened overall. But I do understand there's another factor as well when it comes to the totems, and why the performance has been a challenge, particularly for the shark. So if you can see, if you use this tool, and I'll put this in the show notes, you can see all the ones that are part of are the first ones that are listed, right? So the ones are really kind of the first in line is the best way to describe it. So if you had, all blue toucans, for example, and they're all numbered in a certain sequential order. The number fours and fives will be the last ones to be fed from what's left of the pool. So the ones will get fed first, 2, 3, and so on. So my shark is a number 5. So not is it only in the lower tier in terms of frequency and feed, and that could be good or bad, but it's also the lowest in terms of the amount when it gets fed, and the amount it gets fed at the end of the line. It kind of gets whatever scrums there are left. So understanding that makes it kind of understandable where the performance was somewhat quite weak. The sunny rarity, which is an interesting aspect that was applied here, and you can read more about how that's determined. At least for the two I have, they're within the 80-85 range, so I'm happy with that as well. Where does it lead moving forward? I think that remains to be seen. I think that understanding this, I'm happy for two things. So one, that I didn't unlock all my totems. I'm very, very happy I didn't do that. I think the process would have been frustrating, figuring each and every totem's unique characteristics. So grateful that I didn't do that. Two, I'm also happy in hindsight, obviously, that I had two browns. I had two of the weakest of the structures to kind of really, really kind of focus on how to make sure that these two can actually perform in a most positive manners, and both of them luckily did. So moving forward, whenever this next cycle happens, and I'm sure there's going to be adjustments and tweaks that come in, now I can more or less kind of respond a lot quicker and see how the dynamics work out better. Now, definitely we had a lot of feedback from the community, a lot of feedback from the charts from Red Hook and Credmore communities, and everyone chiming in and going, okay, here's a puzzle, how we can put this puzzle together to help everyone get the best of what they can. So that's been amazing. So second round, I think, and I hope that everyone has learned from here. And if you didn't do first round, now you have information, you have data that you can go back and review and kind of assess the trials and errors or trials and tribulations of all the players that were involved. So that was it. Like I said, I'm very happy. Cycle's done. The returns were a little better than I anticipated they would be. And now we just gotta wait and see what the next round will be like. So again, thank you for your time. Show me your feedback if you tried it or not. We'll be curious to hear what your success stories were, and follow and share. Have a good one. Bye.